It can either be 2 hours, 2 days, or it could be 2 weeks, said the midwife to my wife and I on the due date of our daughter. Can you believe that? Can you believe that after we got up at 3 in the morning and called mom and said, you got to get over here, and after we loaded up the van, and after we drove all the way from Sylvania to St. Luke's in Maumee, and after we took a little selfie, as we're going in the hospital, and after my wife got in the little wheelchair thing and we're praying, and we had a little huddle, in the emergency room, and we're excited because the baby is coming. Can you believe that after all of that, the midwife told us that not only was the baby not coming, but when we asked her when the baby was coming, she said, and I quote, "It could be 2 hours, it could be 2 days, or you could be back in 2 weeks." No joke, fam. When she said that, I said under my breath, I was like, you can't say that. Right? I'm like, you can't say that. Right? You can't say that because I don't know what to do with that information. I don't know what to do. I'm literally, she said this, I'm processing in my brain as she's talking. I'm looking at my wife like, I don't know what that means. I don't know if we should go home or if we just sit in the parking lot for an hour, because it takes us at least 30 minutes to get home and 30 minutes back. So if this baby is coming in 2 hours, I don't know if we should just sit in the parking lot. I don't know if we should go home. And if we do go home, I don't know if we should unpack the van. Should we just leave everything as is? Because we might be going right back and turning around. And what about mom? I don't know what to tell mom. She had to call off work to come at 4 in the morning. I don't know if we should tell her to just go back home and wait at home, or just go back to work and we'd call her, or maybe she should just hang out at our house, because we don't know when this thing is going down. I don't know what to tell the people I work with. I don't know if I should call Ryan and be like, hey bro, you might be preaching this Sunday because I'm out of commission. And what about the kids? Right? I mean, when we left, we didn't wake them up at 4 in the morning, but we left a note saying, hey, we're going and we're going to come back home with a baby. What are we going to do? Should we stop by, 7-Eleven, get some popsicles and we get back home? So when they're like, where's the baby? We're like, there's no baby, but we have a popsicle. I don't know what to do when given a timeline that says it could be 2 hours, it could be 2 days, or it could be 2 weeks. And I share that story with you because I think it's a great parallel for where we are right now as a country, as a city, and as a church. I share that with you because every time someone asks me, Sammy, when are we going to go back? How much longer do we have to wait to be able to gather together at Rave Cinemas? Even though my response, and those of you who have asked me this know this, my response has been, we put together a team of health professionals that are advising us, and the theater is not open anyways. I say all of those things. Even though all of those things are true, we did put a team together, and the theater is not open, and we are thinking and praying through the decisions. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Every time people ask me that question, I want to respond the way the doctor responds, right? And this is just between you and I, those of you who are watching right now, and if someone invited you and you're a friend, between us two, you're now a part of the inner circle. Please don't tell anyone else this, but I'm going to be honest with you guys this morning. What I want to say in those moments is, honestly, I don't know. Okay, I know that's not what people want to hear, but I don't know. And not only do I not know, are you ready for this? It could be 6 days, it could be 6 weeks, or, all right, hold on tight now, it could be 6 months. I don't know. So here's what we're going to do. Okay, I want you to get in the chat right now, and I want you to tell me as passionately as possible if you think it should be 6 days, 6 weeks. I said, just kidding, don't do that. That is the worst idea ever. Please don't tell us why you think it should be either or the other, right? I know everybody has got strong opinions one way or the other. But here's what's interesting. You ready for this? Is it me or does anyone else find it interesting that regardless of how long you think we should or shouldn't wait to go back to normal, you hate that answer? Isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting that the one thing that the camp of we have every reason to wait as long as possible, and the camp of we have no reason to wait any longer, the one thing both camps have in common is both camps hate the answer of it could be 6 days, it could be 6 weeks, or it could be 6 months. You know why that is? You know why, regardless of where you fall, and it's not just about church, it's just the country, our city as a whole, regardless of where you fall in that timeline, do you know why we hate that answer? It's the exact same reason why those of you who think all the schools should be green as soon as possible for as long as possible are just as unhappy as those of us who think, the schools should be red as long as possible. Regardless of where you are, none of us are happy if we're honest. And most of us are fired up. And I think the reason we are, not to oversimplify the conversation, is because we are afraid. Okay, can we just be honest, church, and just acknowledge that between ourselves? That we're afraid. Okay, and I know some of you are watching this right now, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, no, Sammy, I'm not afraid, but that's the problem, Sammy. That is the problem. You're part of the problem. The problem is the media and people like you and Facebook posts. You're trying to get everybody to be afraid, and if we all just stop being afraid, everything will be fine. If that is you, hey, I hear you, but do you find it a little bit ironic that even though you're not afraid and you think the fear is made up, you are actually afraid of what will happen if the rest of us continue to be afraid, right? And so however way you want to slice it, everybody is afraid. Those of us who feel like we're not taking this pandemic too seriously are afraid of what's going to happen in our country, in our city, in our church, if we don't take it as seriously as you do. And those of you who think the pandemic is overblown are afraid of what's going to happen to our country, our city, and our church if we keep living in fear. And I know we're not going to put it in those words, but the reality is, even though we all have different starting points, at the end of the day, we all seem to arrive at the exact same place of fear. We are afraid of what's going to happen if things don't go the way we think they ought to go. Bad news is I don't have an answer that's going to fix either camp. But what I have for you this morning is a word from God that I believe changes everything regardless of what camp that you're in. And when I say a word, I don't mean like a word. I mean like literally one word for you today that I think changes this entire conversation, at least for those of us who claim to be followers of Jesus Christ. Exodus chapter 14 is where we're going to spend a good amount of our time today. Let me give you a little bit of a context if you're not familiar with the story. You've never seen 10 Commandments or the Prince of Egypt. The nation of Israel was enslaved for 400 years. So for 400 years, they were slaves. And God called Charlton Heston, right, a.k.a. Moses, and God's like, I want you to go free my people. And so Moses shows up. He goes to Pharaoh's crib. He's like, yo, man, God says to let this people go. And, of course, Pharaoh's like, nah, why would I let him go? He just laughs him out, And then God starts sending all these crazy plagues that are kind of coming in. And finally, Pharaoh's like, okay, you can take him and you can go. And Moses is like, wow, man, finally God has set his people free. And so Moses goes home and pulls up his computer and sends an email to all of Israel, okay? I mean, it's 1 million people, so it took him forever, but he was going to send a text, but, not everybody was saved. They still got some Android people in there, and he didn't want to throw them in the chat. That's just a big mess. Some of you are watching right now, and that is you. We are praying for you. That's a whole different sermon. But Moses gets in there, composes this email, sends it out to everybody. He's like, hey, this is the day that you have been waiting for. God has set us free. Look at this picture right here. This is Pharaoh, and this is him saying that we can leave. And so we're leaving today. So pack your stuff. Get all of your stuff. Put it in the trailer. Hitch it up to the camel. We're going to meet at Walmart parking lot, right? Because that's where everybody meets. It's big enough for all of us. The whole nation, we're going to meet there, and we're leaving at 4 o'clock today. And so everybody packs all of their stuff, all of their pictures, all their animals, their passports, their Jordans, the Xbox. They packed everything, hitched it into the back of the donkey. Everybody meets at Walmart. Everybody's excited. We are leaving Egypt and we are going to the promised land. Everybody is excited to go on the road trip. They got, their mixtape and their playlist. Like, this is going to be great. Until they looked behind them, and guess who was coming? Pharaoh apparently changed his mind, and he's like, nah, I ain't letting you guys go. I'm coming after you. So they're waiting. They look, and there's tanks and helicopters and jets, and he's just coming to completely wipe them out. I don't know how you would respond in that setting, but here's how they responded when they looked behind them and they saw the enemy breathing down their neck. Listen to what they said. Exodus chapter 14, we're going to jump in verse 10. It says, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified, and it says, and they cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, this is great, they said to Moses, hey, Mo, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us out to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Verse 12, didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. You guys, they had barely made it out of the parking lot of Egypt, and they're freaking out. They're like, Moses, we told you this wasn't going to work. We told you this was a bad idea. We told you should let us just live in our misery. We do not like this at all. Right? I had this idea earlier when I was reading this. I'm like, somebody should create like a Bible, an electronic Bible that has like gifts in it, for just how people responded in that situation. Because I was reading today and I just picture Moses, the really bro Kevin Hart gif where he's just like, like that look. I think Justin Timberlake has one too. That's how I picture Moses' response when they all just start losing their mind and freaking out. Listen to what Moses says to them in verse 13. This is so good. Moses answered the people. He said, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance that the Lord will bring today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. I know there's a whole lot going on in this narrative, but I want us to focus on one word today. I want us to focus on maybe the most frustrating word in Moses' response. Do you know what it is? I think the verses are going to be to my right over here right now. I'm going to give you about 5 seconds. See if you can pick out what the most frustrating word in those verses are in Moses' response. I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Type it into the chat. If you win, we'll tell you, yay, you're a winner. You don't win anything, but you get some applause. But what's the word? I'm going to give you a hint. The word appears 2 times in there. And it's 5 letters. I had to count that in my head. I'm like, how many is it? 5 letters, right? What's the word? The word is, you ready for this? Today. That's the word of the day, is today. Here's what's happening if you're not catching it. These people are following Moses, and he promised that God was going to deliver them. He was going to take them to a land flowing with milk and honey. All of a sudden, the enemy's breathing down their neck. Danger is breathing down their neck, and they are terrified, and they're freaking out, and they're looking at Moses and saying, Moses, what do you have to say? We told you we didn't want to be any part of this. And here's Moses' response. You ready? Moses says to them, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you. Here's our word of the day, today. Okay, if you're in the chat, which I know is a lot of you guys, do me a favor, just type the word today in the chat, okay, in caps. Just type, everybody just type it, okay? Come on, type the word today. Type it, even if you're not going to say anything else, today. The Egyptians you see, he uses the word again, Moses says, today you will never see again. To which I would have said, if I was in the crowd, excuse me, Mr. Reverend Moses, appreciate the word, appreciate the pep talk, I appreciate, the encouragement, but I'm going to need you to do better than that, right? I'm going to need you to do better than the Lord will deliver me today. I'm going to need a little bit more of an assurance than that. Okay, how about the Lord will deliver me today and tomorrow and next week and next month and next year? Okay, how about the Lord will deliver me for the next decade? How about the Lord will deliver me for the rest of my life? But Moses doesn't say that. Moses says to them, no, God will deliver you today, and the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. Again, there's a whole lot going in this narrative. But you guys, could it be that in the midst of this story in the Old Testament is a word that is meant to be a tangible reminder for you and I of how God often responds when we are afraid and we are scrambling and we don't know what to do? Could it be that in the midst of this pandemic and all the camps and all the opinions and all the Facebook groups, could it be that the word that God has for you and I today is today? That God is saying, hey, right now as you're watching, I just want you to know that you will see the deliverance of God today. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance that the Lord will bring you today. I want to ask you guys a question that I've been wrestling with all day today, and I'm not even going to front, fam. I had a hard time answering this question. So if you have a hard time answering it, I'm with you. Is that enough? Is it enough if God's response to you and I, in the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of all of the question, in the midst of all the waiting, and we don't know how long we have to wait for everything to go back to normal. We don't know how long our kids have to wait. We don't know how long we have to wait for the economy and for our businesses and to be able to see our friends again and to be able to gather again. I mean, we have so many questions. Is it enough that God may be saying to you and I today, I will deliver you today? Is that enough, or do you need more? Do I need more than that, is the question I ask myself today. Do I need a little more assurance than that? Do I need God to say, no, dog, I'm gonna deliver you today and tomorrow and next week and next year and for the next decade? Is it enough? For those of us who are following Jesus Christ, is it enough that God promises us to deliver us today, or do we need him to map out the whole plan for us to trust him? Now, please don't miss the point. I'm not saying that your future is not secure. I'm not saying that God hasn't assured you or God doesn't care, because God cares. And he promises us. In fact, Jesus says in the Gospel of John, he says, you have trouble in this earth, but take heart. Why? I have overcome the world. That's Jesus letting you know, I've been to the end. I know how the game ends, and we win. So no, I'm not suggesting that tomorrow and the future doesn't matter. What I'm suggesting is, what good does it make for us to say we trust God for the future if we cannot grab a hold of it today? What good is it if we cannot trust God and say it is enough when he says to us that I will deliver you today? Could it be that this whole time that we're all just freaking out about this pandemic and we're posting and reposting and commenting and articles and YouTube and conspiracies and not conspiracies and all this stuff? Could it be in the midst of all of that, and we're all trying to figure out how long it's going to take and when it's going to end, that God's response to you and I is just today? Could it be God's just saying, hey, will you trust me today? Will you trust me today? I didn't really name this sermon, but if I did, I wanted to call it Tomorrow is Overrated. Right? And I mean, if you've ever taken Strength Finders, I took it a long time ago. Futuristic is like one of my strengths. I'm a visionary. I love to envision the future. Ask our staff team, they'll tell you, before we even do something, I'm thinking about the next two that we're going to do. It's how I'm wired, y'all. And some of you are watching this and you're the same way. And if that's you, what God's been showing me over the last couple of days is that, Sammy, it doesn't matter what your vision of the future is if it is not enough for you to trust me to get you through today. Moses looks at these people who are losing their minds and they say, today, God will deliver you. And it was enough. I love the way Jesus put it in Matthew chapter 6, I believe it is, when his disciples came up to him and they said, teach us to pray. Right? Like, teach us how to pray, which is such a humble request. And listen to what Jesus says. Right? You guys know this, right? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, that kingdom come, that will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then he says this, give us this day our daily bread. Isn't that interesting? Like, Jesus is teaching us how to pray, and he's saying, when you pray to God, I want you to say, God, I want you to give me today. Give us today our daily bread. Not give us today and give us tomorrow, or not give us next week, or not give us for the next year. No, Jesus, when he was teaching his disciples and teaching us to pray, he was teaching us to pray in a way that postures our hearts to focus on what God was doing right in that moment, right on that day. Today, Jesus says, pray to God to give you bread. Fast forward a few paragraphs later, and Jesus will double down on that. and listen to what he says. I'm going to read this from the Message paraphrase. Listen to what Jesus says in the very famous Sermon on the Mount. He says this. He talks about worry, and then here's how he summarizes it. This is so good. He says, give your entire attention to what God is doing right now. Don't get worked up about what may or may not happen tomorrow. God, you ready for this, will help you deal with whatever hard things come up when they come up. I'm going to read that again. Give your entire attention, he says, to what God's doing right now, what God's doing today. Don't get worked up about tomorrow or what could happen and all the scenarios and all that. No. He's saying God's going to give you what you need today. He will help you deal with whatever hard thing come up when they come. Here's what Jesus is saying if you're catching it. He's saying, hey, you don't have to worry about tomorrow if you can trust me for today. Right? I mean, that's it. He's saying if you trust me to get you through today, you do not have to worry about tomorrow. In fact, the best way for you to be secure about tomorrow is for you to trust me today. When we trust God, fam, for today, for God to deliver us today, for God to get us through today, God always takes care of the rest. And there's so many places in this scripture that we see this over and over again, but perhaps there's no better example than one we started with. Right? For those of you, again, who have never seen the movie, you don't know how the story ends. It is incredible. So they're sitting there. The Pharaoh is coming with the Egyptians. They are losing their minds. And Moses is like, God's going to deliver you today. Today is going to deliver you. And they're like, he's like, I promise you. And then guess what happens? Moses, stretches, the staff in his hand, and the sea split in half. Okay, if you're watching this, you're like, that sounds the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. You're right. It is the craziest thing you've ever heard in your life. God literally split the sea in half, and it was epic. It was amazing. They walked across it. Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston started singing, There Shall Be Miracles. It was glorious, goosebumps, fireworks. I mean, it was the most epic day ever. And guess what? God did exactly what God said he was going to do. He got them through the day in spite of the fact that they saw no way forward. But guess what happened the next day? They're in the desert, and they're hungry. And they've been cruising for a while. And they're going, wow, this is different. No Chick-fil-A, no Burger King, no Wendy's, no McDonald's. They don't even have Taco Bell in this desert. That's how bad this is. They start to complain, and they want to go back to Egypt. Right? You ever been there? You ever been in a place where you cried out to God yesterday, and then God did a miracle, and you came through, and then the next day you run into another problems, and it's like you just have amnesia. You're just like, God, where are you? Guess what God did, fam? Guess what God did? Okay, this is amazing. The Bible says that God sent manna from heaven. Okay, just imagine this. They're in the desert. There's no food. They're hungry. God sends manna. There's like lettuce wraps coming from heaven. And it says that there was enough for everybody. And here's what's so fascinating about the story. This is crazy. Manna came from heaven, and God says, hey, I want you to take whatever you need for today, but I don't want you to save any for tomorrow. Just think about that. Right? I don't want you to save any. And now, of course, some of the people were like you and I, right? I mean, they're like, yeah, sure, Mr. Moses, that sounds great. And they got their bags and their stuff in the manna because they're like, hey, man, we're going. What if it doesn't happen tomorrow? What if it doesn't happen next week? We got to store extra. And guess what happens the next morning? All the food rots. All of it. Like everybody that tried to save some for tomorrow lost it all. Right? And Moses is like, no, dog, that's not how it works. You got to trust God for today and trust that he's got tomorrow. And so the next day, manna comes from heaven, and guess what? They just took what they needed for the day, and then the next day, God provided. And then the next day, they're like, oh, now we don't have water. And guess what? Water comes out of a rock. God provides water. And God over and over just kept saying, just trust me today. Will you just trust me to deliver you today? I will split the sea if I have to. I will drop lettuce wraps from heaven if I have to. I will have water come out of a rock if I have to. Will you trust me for today? You guys, God delivered them every single day for 40 years. Can I read to you what God said to them after they got to the promised land? Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 5 to 6. Okay, and I know, everybody's probably reading Deuteronomy right now at home going, wow, yeah, that's exactly what I've been meditating on, Sammy. That is awesome. Deuteronomy 29, 5 to 6. Listen to what God says to them. He says this. He says, I have led you 40 years in the wilderness. And this is amazing. Your clothes have not worn out on you, and your sandals have not worn off your feet. You have not eaten bread, and you have not drunk wine or strong drink, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. I read this earlier, and I just teared up in my basement. And I wrote in my Bible, God's got receipts. You guys, he says, I have led you for 40 years. Your clothes have not worn out. Your sandals have not worn off your feet. God had receipts of his faithfulness. Yes, it was longer than they thought it was going to be. Yes, it was so much harder than they thought it was going to be. But every step of the way, God was faithful. Won't he do it? Won't he do it? Won't he do it today? Every step of the way he was faithful. Now I know it's so easy to make fun of the Israelites, and it's so easy to pick on them. But come on now, let's be fair. When they started this journey, I don't know if you realize this or not, they didn't know how long it was going to take. Okay, so Moses could have said to them when they left Egypt, hey man, we're going to the promised land. And I can't tell you if it's going to take 4 hours, 4 days, 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 years, or 40 years. Right? Just like you and I don't know how long this pandemic's going to go and when we're going to go back to normal, whatever that is, or when we're going to get to the other side of it. I mean, they had the same questions that we have. They didn't have an exact timeline. They didn't have a certainty in how it was going to play out. But what the nation of Israel had and what you and I have today is an invitation. They didn't know how long it was going to take and how it was going to play out. But they had an invitation from the God of the universe, an invitation to trust him today. God was saying to them what I believe God is saying to you and I. Will you trust him? Trust me today. Here's the moral of the story if you're not catching it. If you are willing to trust God one day at a time, you will see his faithfulness over a long period of time. If we are willing to trust, regardless of everything that's happening around us, whatever camp you're in, I don't care. If you're willing to say, God, I'm going to trust you one day at a time, guess what's going to happen? You will look back and you will see the faithfulness of God over a long period of time. And I know nobody wants to hear this, but the flip side is also true. If we're not willing to trust God one day at a time, then we will miss his faithfulness over a long period of time. If it's not enough for us that God says he will deliver us today, then it will never be enough. Can I show you what this looks like? I mean, it breaks my heart. Can I show you the tragedy of not believing God at his word for it not to be enough when God says, I'm going to come through today? Listen to how God put it in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 29. Listen to what he said. When the nation, after 40 years, they got to the promised land, 40 years of God being faithful. Listen to what God says to them. They got to the promised land and they saw giants and they're afraid. And God says this to them. God says, then I said to you, don't be afraid. Do not be afraid of them. The Lord your God, who is going before you, will fight for you as he did in Egypt before your very eyes and in the wilderness. There you saw how the Lord your God carries you as a father carries his son all the way until you reach this place. What an image. God is saying, I put you on my back and I carried you the entire journey. If that don't get you jacked up, check your pulse. Ask someone next to you to call 911, or because I don't know what else you're going to hear this morning that's going to be as incredible as this imagery of the God of the universe saying, I put you on my back. And then listen to what he says in verse 32. He says, in spite of this, God says, in spite of this, you did not trust in the Lord your God, who went ahead of you on your journey, fire by night, cloud by day, to search out places for you to camp and show you the way to go. You guys, they had a cloud of fire at night, right? They had fire at night and cloud by day guarding them. Okay, when Pharaoh and the Egyptians were coming, that was there. Like there was a cloud leading them along the way the entire time, and they missed it. Right? In spite of all that God did, they did not trust him. And I wonder if the reason they missed it is the same reason you and I miss God today. I wonder if the reason they didn't trust God is the same reason you and I don't trust God today in the midst of this pandemic. I wonder if they were looking for the whole picture and they were asking all the questions that we're asking, like, man, but how long is this journey going to take? And what's going to happen tomorrow? And what about this? And what about that? And I don't like this and I don't like that. And the whole time they missed the fact that God literally had fire by night and a cloud by day to lead them to the promised land. Now, here's what's so interesting about that. Listen to how he's put it in verse 33. He says, I went ahead of you, fire by night, cloud by day, to search out places for you to camp and to show you the way to go. What God is saying here is like, hey, I know I didn't show you the whole picture, but come on now, every single day I helped you and led you to the next step. Fam, could it be that this is how God wants to lead us through this pandemic? Could it be that the way through this thing is not God's going to download the picture for us and tell us exactly when it's going to end and how it's going to play out, and it's going to go exactly how we hope or we believe it ought to go in our country, in our city, and in our church? Could it be that what God is saying is, no, I'm going to lead you day by day? Could it be that God's saying, I just need you to trust me today, one day at a time? So, if I could just speak to our specific context as Soma City Church, for those of you who are asking and have been asking, when are we going to go back tomorrow? How long? How much longer do we got to wait? I don't know. I said it before, I'll say it again. I don't know how long it's going to take. And I don't know how it's going to play out. But church, here's what I know. I know that we have an opportunity to trust God today. I know that as long as God gives me the privilege to lead this community that we have, I'm going to trust God to deliver us today. And I'm just inviting you, regardless of what camp you're in, will you join me in that? Okay, regardless of whether you think we waited too long or we haven't waited long enough, will you join me somewhere in the middle where we say, no. The question we're asking above all those other questions is, do we trust God to deliver us today? Will you join your voice with me? Will you lift your eyes and lift your heart with me to heaven and say to the most faithful God, yes, we will trust you today? If you said it, as the songwriter says, we believe it, and it is enough for us that you will deliver us today. And I know it sounds like preacher talk, but I'm telling you right now, and this is not just for our church, okay? If you don't care about our church, that's fine. Think about this in your life. I'm telling you, if you will just trust God to deliver you today, if you would just trust God to get you through today. I don't know what it is that's keeping you up at night, that's bugging you, that's causing anxiety. Maybe it's your business, it's the economy, maybe it's your kids in school, maybe you're just overwhelmed, maybe it's your health, maybe it's your relationship status. I don't know what it is that you're waiting on and what it is that's causing you to freak out a little bit, but I'm telling you, if you can just trust God to get you through today, not tomorrow, not next week, just today, if you would trust God to get you through today, and then you wake up tomorrow morning and he gives you that same invitation and you trust him to get you through tomorrow, someday soon, I don't know how long, you will look back and you will be blown away by the faithfulness of God. You will look back someday and go, wow, He carried me the entire way. I don't know about you guys, but I don't want my story at the end of this pandemic. I don't want my story in the next 5, 10 years to be, wow, God carried me in spite of all that. I didn't trust him. Today, God says, will you trust me? I love the way I was on Twitter the other day, and Beth Moore said this, tweeted this, and it was so good. She says, sometimes for the life of us, we cannot see a way forward. But Jesus can. He doesn't need a paved road. He doesn't need a path. He doesn't need a map app. He doesn't need a bridge. He doesn't need a boat, wheels, or wings. Doesn't need ideas. What he wants is your trust. There is a way forward always. And then she said this. Are you ready for this? Walk with him and he will walk you through one day at a time. One day at a time. One day at a time, he will walk you through. I love the way the writer put it in Lamentations when he says that his mercies are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. Every morning, his mercies are new. So here's my question for you in closing. What do you need to trust God for today? Right? I know you've got things you're trusting God for in your future, next week, next month, next year, next decade, but today, right, in this season, what do you need to trust God for? How do you need to trust God for? What is your response when God says to you, I will deliver you today? What do you need God to get you through today? Right? You're watching this right now. I don't know, maybe it's almost 11 o'clock in the morning. And you're going, man, I got about 9, 10 hours before I go to bed. What do you need God to do in the next 9 to 10 hours? Do you believe the word of God coming to you this morning when he says that I will deliver you today? Do you believe that even when you don't see it, he is working for your good and for your glory? We don't do this very often, but I'm going to ask you to do something that might be a little hard for some of you. I want you to comment what that thing is. Right? Can we just do that, church? Right? I know we haven't seen each other in a while, but can we just, like, I don't know, get as close as we can in the comments? Can we just say, you don't have to give a whole paragraph, just one sentence, just say, hey, this is what I need to trust God today. Right? This is what I'm worried about. Here's what I'm trusting God for today. Okay, I'm freaking out about my kids and no school and what that's going to mean. I don't know how we're going to do it. But today, I'm going to trust God to get my kids through today. I'm worried about my mental health and I don't know what to think and how to feel. But you know what? I'm going to trust that God will get me through today. I'm worried about my relationship status. I'm worried about my job. I'm worried about the economy. I'm worried about my business. But you know what? Today, I'm just going to trust that God will get us through today. And when I wake up tomorrow, I will do the exact same thing. What do you need to trust God to do today? Jesus, I just thank you so much for your goodness and your faithfulness over our lives. Thank you that you show up every single day and you invite us, God, to hop on your back, step by step. You don't show us the whole picture, God, but you lead us every step of the way. And we may not have fire by night and a cloud by day, but we have something so much better than that. That we have your faithfulness, we have your community, we have your church, we have your word, you have your spirit that lives inside of us. I pray, God, that we would be a community of people. We would be a church that trusts you day to day to day to day. Thank you for being so faithful to us. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen. You guys worship with us?